We have many long-time church-going veterans here, people who have, from their youngest years up through their adult life and even into their later years, are fixtures here on Sundays and holy days. Did you ever wonder, even our younger parishioners, what readings you've been exposed to the most? What have you heard more often than others in the course of our church years? Now we've come to understand, and rightfully so, that the cycles of the church year, 3 cycles, Matthew, Mark, Luke, the readings of John get mentioned in some special occasions, but normally with the cycles that we have, we're able to pretty much get all of the scriptures in the course of a 3-year period. But surprisingly, the one that you may have heard the most often is one that you heard today. And it's because on so many occasions, special occasions we would say, funerals and weddings, particularly the weddings, we hear the second reading, don't we? The preeminence, the prominence of love. And Paul stresses that to the people of Corinth in his first letter. But it's one that draws a lot of support from brides and grooms as they look at what they want to commit to each other in the course of their marriage. First of all, Paul wants to be clear that with the spectacular gifts that people have, gifts of the Spirit, the ability to speak in tongues, the ability to understand the truths of the faith, that for all of that, it's love that matters. He says, if I speak in human and angelic tongues, if I speak in tongues, but do not have love, I'm just noise being made, a resounding gong or a clashing cymbal. And if I have the gift of prophecy, comprehend all mysteries and all knowledge, if I have faith so as to move mountains, what faith that must be, huh? But I do not have love, I am nothing. If I give away everything I own, who would do that? And if I hand my body over so that I may boast, but do not have love, I gain nothing. That's kind of hard to understand. First of all, the people can have faith that strong, but also that they could somehow do it without feeling love inside of them. But Paul goes on and he talks of adjectives to describe love. Not just a frivolous kind of love that we sometimes will hear in songs or poems or even on weekly TV shows, whatever. Love, 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 love. Love, 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 love. But do we really understand that? Love is patient. Certainly married couples know that. Love is kind. It's not jealous or pompous or inflated or rude. Doesn't seek its own interests. It's not quick-tempered. Doesn't brood over injuries. Doesn't rejoice over wrongdoing. But rejoices with the truth. And then when I'm giving a wedding homily, and they've chosen this reading, it's at this point that I try to accentuate the nature of covenant to become one, other-focused love. And on that I say that this kind of love, this kind of covenant love, bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. When I first became a priest over 30 years or so ago, the translation, rather than bearing all things, was excuse all things. And I think that's probably a good reminder to husbands and wives. Cut our partner a little bit of slack, to not sweat the small things, to let the changes that are going to be made be made at the instigation of the one making the change. Believes all things. And of course, the first thing that comes to mind with that is believing as in believing in God, believing in Jesus, believing in heaven. But it also is believing in one another, having an openness, an honesty, a transparency in our relationship. Hopes all things. What a great underrated virtue hope is. We're able to do the things that God expects us to do in not only our married life with our children, but also in the workplace and our social gatherings. Because we have a hope that there's a world after this one. And finally, if we can bear all things, believe all things, hope all things, we can do the last. We can endure all things. I like to comment to our bride and groom that I would be celebrating the wedding for that I wish the gift I could give to them on their wedding day was an assurance that they have nothing but happy days ahead. We know that doesn't happen, though. Huh? That's just not the nature of it. But we can, even in that back and forth between happiness and sadness, it's very, very possible, even in sad times, to feel joy. We don't know that Jesus particularly had a lot of happy times, but he had a lot of joyful times. And it's possible then that not only with married couples, but with all believers who live in communion with one another, to recognize the fact that we have a great blessing from God, and one that sustains us throughout this life until we reach the next. The passage that concludes most weddings is the one that says, love never fails. And of course, what they're talking about is this kind of two become one, covenant, other-focused, selfless love. This kind of love never fails. But I just want to go on a little farther because most of the wedding readings don't include the part that talks about speaking as a child versus looking at things as an adult. When I was a child, writes Paul, I used to talk as a child, think as a child, reason as a child. But when I became a man, I put aside childish things. At present, I know partially. Then I shall know fully, as I am fully known. And this is an important understanding, I think, to have this last sentence. So faith, hope, love remain, these three. But the greatest of these is love. And the reason, of course, that love is preeminent is because faith is only needed for as long as we're separated from heaven. We don't need to have faith in God or faith in heaven once we get there. Hope, that's satisfied completely. Everything we hope for in heaven we realize. So we don't need faith or hope once we get to heaven. But love, even if we've been a good lover, even a great lover here on earth, we will see love unbelievably strong when we get to the other side of the kingdom. I want a couple final comments for you because Deacon Chong proclaimed both of the gospel readings and preached on the one last week that talked about Jesus' return to Nazareth. This was kind of a high point for the people of Nazareth. This was their hometown hero. He'd already been out throughout the region around the Sea of Tiberias. He had been working out of Capernaum, many miracles he'd worked. And so, yeah, show us what you got, Jesus. We didn't know you were that way when you lived with us. And it says that all spoke highly of him when he came to the synagogue and were amazed at the gracious words that came from his mouth. You'll remember from last week's gospel, Jesus, after reading the passage from Isaiah that talked about what to expect from the Messiah, says, today this scripture passage is fulfilled in your hearing. But then doubt begins to enter. Isn't this the son of Joseph? And Jesus goes on to give them the two examples. One was at the time of great drought, when he did not appear to any widows in Israel, but only to the widow in Zarephath in the land of Sidon, a non-Jew. And then when there were many lepers in Israel, it was Naaman the Syrian that was healed at the initiation of Elisha the prophet. And now resentment begins to build in the congregation. Oh, I thought he was us. I thought he was our proponent. And they go from being amazed at the words that come from his mouth to they were all filled with fury. Huh? Can you imagine being that worked up? But they rose up, drove him out of the town. This is his hometown, remember, although he hasn't been there for a while. And led him to the brow of the hill on which their town had been built, and planned on hurling him down headlong. What a tragic end that would be to our salvation story. But Jesus passes through the midst of them and goes away. But it goes to explain to us, I think, the kind of challenges that he had, that he was swimming upstream most of the time, it seems like, trying to persuade people that should have known from their Jewish faith. But at the same time, it was one of the lessons that he had learned. A prophet is not without honor except in his native place, that we have judgments, prejudgments that we make on others. Oh, this can't be who he claims to be. I saw him when he was a kid. He didn't have anything going for him. But that's our challenge, I think. It's not only to see others in a different way, but also our own selves, to recognize we can change and not to worry about what consternation that may cause to others. We're going to go wherever the grace of God leads us. And in doing that, we follow the example of Jesus' followers, because that's what we want to be known by here on earth. All of us, followers of Jesus.